king of the Golden Mountain. Who was once a merchant. He was a very wealthy man and had 2 children, a son and a daughter, who at this time was still very small. And the merchant had his entire wealth in one venture, and he was waiting for his ships to return. And he had news that all his ships had sunk, and that although he had been a rich man, he was now a very poor man. All he had left was a field outside the city. So the merchant went out to the field and was pacing up and down, when a dwarf appeared to him and said, "Why are you so worried? Why are you pacing up and down on this field?" And the merchant explained that his ships had sunk and all his wealth with it. The dwarf said, "I can help. I can give you money, but in exchange you must meet me here in 12 years' time. Meet me here in this field in 12 years' time and give to me whatever is the first thing that touches your leg when you get home." And the merchant, thinking this sounded like a really good deal, because he thought, the first thing that touches my leg could be my dog. My dog always rushes out to meet me. So, the bargain was signed, and the bargain was sealed. And when the merchant got home, though this is a story, the moral of which is whenever you sign a contract, always make sure you have taken professional legal advice. When the man got home, his son was so excited to see him that he ran to the door and wrapped his arms around his father's leg. The father realised to his horror that he had agreed to hand over his son to the dwarf in 12 years' time. A few days later, the merchant went up into the attic, looking for anything he could sell, and he found there enough money to start his business once more. So the merchant built up another business, but always hanging over him was the dark cloud of knowing that he would have to hand over his son to the dwarf. So 12 years passed quite quickly, and the man had to explain to his son about the deal that he had signed with the dwarf. So the son went to a priest and had himself blessed. And when they got to the field, the son drew a circle around him, stood in the centre of the circle. And when the dwarf appeared, the dwarf said, he said to the dwarf, "You cannot take me." But the deal had been struck. So the dwarf found an old boat and said, "If your son refuses to come with me, he must travel in the boat." So the boy got into the boat and let the river take him to wherever it would. But as the father was watching his son glide away from him in the little boat, the boat turned over. And the man thought his son to be drowned. But the boat carried on with the son inside, and he travelled many, many miles until he came to the Golden Mountain. And there on the Golden Mountain was a castle. empty and cold. And the young man knew that the castle was enchanted. But he walked through it until the very last room that he came to, he found a snake. But the snake spoke to him and said, I am an enchanted princess. I have been waiting for 12 years for you to come and rescue me from the spell. If you will be my saviour and rescue me from the spell which holds me in the form of a snake and holds me here in this castle, stay here for 3 nights. 12 men will come and they will beat you, but do not speak to them. On the second night, 12 men will come and they will stab you, but do not speak to them. On the third night, 24 men will come and they will chop off your head. But do not be afraid, for I will come to you with the water of life. And with that water, I can bring you back to life. So the young man agreed, because it seemed like such a strange story. And the snake seemed very convincing. So everything happened just as the snake, the enchanted princess, had said. But at the end of the third night, she came to him in her form as a princess with the water of life, placed his head back on his body, restored him to life, and there he was. So the two of them lived happily together for some time, and of course they married. And of course the princess, who was by now Queen of the Golden Mountain, gave birth to a son. Well, something about seeing his young son grow reminded the king of home, and reminded him of his own father, and how much he missed him, and how much he really wanted to see his father again. So he said to his queen, I must go. I must travel to my own home. And the queen said, do not leave me. It will bring us all ill fortune. But the king insisted, because the pull to see his own family was so great. And so his queen gave him a wishing ring. She said, you can use this ring to wish for whatever you need, but never wish for me to travel to where your father lived. So the young man used the ring and soon found himself outside the gates of his home city. But the guards at the city gates wouldn't let him in because he was so strangely dressed. They distrusted strangers. So the king went out into the countryside and found a shepherd and exchanged clothes with him. And when he presented himself to the city guards wearing a felted shepherd's coat, they let him through. And he found his father's house. But his father refused to believe that the shepherd standing in front of him was his own son. But the man said, do you not remember your son had a birthmark on his right arm? And he took off his shirt and showed him the birthmark. And so the merchant, perhaps he was happy to see his son. But when he told him the story of the princess, of the snake, of the golden mountain, the merchant couldn't believe it, of the shabbily dressed shepherd standing in front of him. But the king said, "It is all true. I am really king of the Golden Mountain. I just wish that my wife and my son were here so I could prove it to you." And with that, his wife and his son appeared before them. But his wife wept inconsolably, for you have brought ill fortune to all of us. The king took his wife and the son down to the field, and he showed her where the river was that the little boat had travelled in. And he said, "I'm so tired. We sleep a little while." So he lay down, placed his head in his wife's lap and slept. And while he was asleep, the queen took the ring from his finger. And she left behind just one shoe, and then wished herself and her son back in the castle at the Golden Mountain. So when the king awoke, he found himself alone in a field. He thought, "I cannot go back to my parents. They will think I'm a sorcerer. I must make my own way home to the Golden Mountain." So he began to travel. He walked into the mountains, and there he met 3 giants. The giants were brothers who were arguing about how best to divide their father's inheritance. And when they saw him, they said, the little people are cunning. Let us ask for his advice." And the first thing they had inherited was a cloak, which makes you invisible. The king said to the giants, "Let me see the cloak, let me try it." So he wrapped the cloak over his shoulders, and to his amazement, he really was invisible. And the second thing was a sword, which, if you held it in your hand and said, "All heads off except mine," it would cut off the heads of everyone around you, but not your own. And finally, there was a pair of boots which would take you wherever you wish to go. So the king managed to obtain all 3 things from the 3 giant brothers, and thus their inheritance was divided. So he used the wishing boots to take him back to the castle on the Golden Mountain, and there he found that there was music coming from the castle, and lots of strangers. And there, the queen was marrying another man. So the king wrapped his cloak around him and sat behind his wife at the wedding feast. And every time a servant placed food on her plate, the king would reach out and would take it. Every time they filled her goblet with wine, he would drink it. His wife said, "Am I cursed?" And the king threw off his cloak and stood up, still wearing his shepherd's coat, and said, "Wedding is over, for the true king is here." But the servants and the ministers and all the guests looked at him, did not believe him, So he said to his sword, "All heads off except mine." So the sword cut off all the heads, leaving the king alone on the Golden Mountain. I'm not sure what to make of that story. There's certainly lots of images that we're all familiar with of the boat drifting down the river um, and magical swords, but perhaps that's not really a very nice ending. There we are, the King of the Golden Mountain. I hope you enjoyed that story. I hope you'll enjoy lots of the other Brothers Grimm stories. And I hope to see you again soon.